Hello, I'm SA, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The clarity of a digital voice call placed from a speeding train, the breathtaking detail of an image transmitted across hundreds of millions of kilometers from a Martian rover, the very blueprint of life itself deciphered from a raw genetics sample, all these seemingly disparate feats of modern science and engineering share a silent, common ancestor. They are all, in some fundamental way, descendants of a single, elegant, mathematical procedure conceived in the 1960s. This procedure, a cornerstone of digital communication and computational science, emerged from the mind of Andrew Viterbi, an engineer who possessed a rare ability to see the deep structural similarities connecting abstract theory with the most pragmatic of problems. His work provided a universal key for unlocking information from the grasp of noise, a contribution so foundational that its presence in our daily lives is as pervasive as it is invisible. To appreciate the genius of Viterbi's creation, one must first understand the profound challenge it was designed to conquer. By the mid-20th century, the space age was in full bloom, and with it came a problem of cosmic proportions. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory and other pioneering institutions were sending probes deeper into the solar system, but the signals they sent back were fragile whispers. Stretched across unimaginable distances, these transmissions were inevitably corrupted by random thermal and cosmic noise. The core task was one of error correction, how to reconstruct the original, pristine message from the garbled version received on Earth. The theoretical possibility of doing so was established by Claude Shannon's landmark noisy channel coding theorem, which proved that near-perfect communication was achievable, provided one stayed below a certain data rate, defined by the channel's capacity. The prevailing practical method for this task was known as sequential decoding. While clever, it had a critical vulnerability. The decoder would explore a tree of possible message paths, making educated guesses and backtracking when it hit a dead end. In conditions of low noise, this worked reasonably well. However, as the signal weakened and the noise increased, the decoder would be forced to backtrack so frequently and explore so many branches that its computational workload would explode. It could become paralyzed, a condition engineers termed computational cutoff, effectively losing the signal entirely. For deep space missions, where every bit of data was precious and signal strength was perilously low, this was a catastrophic failure point. A more robust, more efficient, and more reliable method was essential. Viterbi's breakthrough was an act of profound intellectual synthesis. He approached the decoding problem armed with two powerful conceptual tools from disparate fields. From Shannon, he took the framework of information theory and a specific technique of convolutional codes, a method of encoding data where each output bit is influenced by several preceding input bits, weaving a redundant structure into the signal. From the mathematician Richard Bellman, he borrowed the powerful concept of dynamic programming, encapsulated in Bellman's principle of optimality. This principle elegantly states that any optimal path from a starting point to an end point is itself composed of optimal subpaths. A decision made at any stage must be optimal for all subsequent stages, regardless of how the current stage was reached. Viterbi realized that these two ideas could be fused into a single, powerful solution. His 1967 paper, titled Error Bounds for Convolutional Codes and an Asymptotically Optimum Decoding Algorithm, laid out the new paradigm. He reconceptualized the entire process. The stream of original, unencoded data could be seen as a sequence of hidden states in a system. The convolutional encoder transforms these hidden states into a sequence of observable, transmitted symbols. Because of noise, the received symbols are a corrupted version of the transmitted ones. The problem, then, is to observe the corrupted sequence and deduce the most likely sequence of hidden states that produced it. This is the classic structure of what is now known as a hidden Markov model. Viterbi's genius was in applying Bellman's dynamic programming to solve it. He visualized the problem using a structure called a trellis diagram. This diagram is a lattice that maps every possible state of the encoder at each moment in time, showing all possible transitions to the next set of states. A brute force approach would require evaluating every single possible path through this trellis, a number that grows exponentially with the length of the message, rendering it computationally impossible for any meaningful amount of data. Viterbi's algorithm, however, performs a radical simplification. At each time step, it advances through the trellis one stage at a time. For each possible destination state, it examines all the paths leading into it and calculates their likelihood based on the received signal. Then, it performs its crucial operation that keeps only the single most likely path, the survivor path, leading to that state and discards all others. This act of aggressive, intelligent pruning is the heart of the algorithm's power. By retaining only the optimal subpath to each state at every step, it avoids the exponential explosion of complexity. The total number of computations becomes a linear function of the message length. What was once an intractable problem became a manageable, deterministic procedure that could be executed in real time. It was an algorithm that guaranteed finding the absolute best path through the trellis, providing a maximum likelihood sequence estimation that was both optimal and computationally efficient. The immediate impact of this work was felt most profoundly at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Engineers struggling to decode the faint signals from the Mariner space probes recognized the immense potential in Viterbi's paper. They implemented the algorithm, and the results were transformative. They could now reliably reconstruct high-resolution images and telemetry data from signals so weak they were nearly buried in noise data that would have been completely lost to the computational cutoff failures of sequential decoders. The Viterbi algorithm effectively increased the reach of humanity's senses into the solar system, painting clearer pictures of Mars and other worlds than ever before. While born from the needs of space exploration, the algorithm's utility proved to be nearly universal. Its core logic, finding the most likely sequence of hidden events from a series of observations, is a problem that appears in countless domains. When digital cellular telephony emerged, the Viterbi algorithm became a mandatory component in standards like GSM and CDMA for decoding voice data. It is embedded in the Wi-Fi protocols that connect our devices, in the digital television signals we watch, and in the satellite modems that provide connectivity to remote regions. Beyond communications, its application generalized beautifully. In speech recognition, it deciphers the most likely sequence of words from a raw audio waveform. In bioinformatics, it performs the critical task of aligning DNA and protein sequences to uncover evolutionary relationships. The algorithm's publication also catalyzed further innovation. The communications engineer Gottfried Ungerbuch, for instance, later developed a highly efficient signaling scheme known as trellis-coded modulation, which became the standard for high-speed telephone modems. Ungerbuch's brilliant coding scheme, however, required an equally brilliant decoder to be practical. The Viterbi algorithm was the perfect fit, providing the essential decoding engine that made his theoretical advance a commercial reality. The paper from 1967 was more than a solution to a specific problem. It was a gift of a fundamental tool. Yet, the journey of this elegant piece of mathematics from an academic journal to a silicon chip inside billions of devices required a different kind of thinking. It demanded a bridge between the world of pure theory and the world of applied engineering, a bridge Andrew Viterbi himself would go on to build. Building that intellectual bridge became Andrew Viterbi's next great undertaking. The algorithm bearing his name was a testament to the power of abstract mathematical reasoning, yet its true potential remained confined to the pages of academic journals. A profound chasm separated this elegant theory from its tangible, hardware-based realization, a gap that frustrated military and commercial clients who required robust, high-performance systems in the physical world. The problem was one of translation. The language of probability and state diagrams needed to be converted into the language of logic gates, silicon wafers, and reliable digital modems. This challenge defined the second major chapter of Viterbi's career, a move from the university classroom to the forefront of technological entrepreneurship. In 1968, this ambition took corporate form alongside his close friend and fellow academic Irwin M. Jacobs from the University of California, San Diego, and with networking pioneer Leonard Kleinnock of UCLA, Viterbi co-founded Linkabit Corporation. The company's very structure was a radical experiment. It was conceived as a faculty-run enterprise, a living conduit between the cutting-edge research emerging from Southern California's elite engineering departments and the pressing demands of the marketplace. The founders cultivated a unique methodology that used three essential pillars. First was the rigorous theoretical analysis that Viterbi himself championed, ensuring every design was grounded in sound mathematical principles. Second was the extensive use of computer simulation, a relatively new practice that allowed them to test and refine complex communication schemes before committing to expensive hardware. The final pillar was rapid hardware prototyping, turning validated simulations into functional devices with remarkable speed. This integrated approach allowed Linkabit to operate in a space few could occupy, simultaneously publishing peer-reviewed papers while shipping advanced technology to discerning clients. The initial clients were precisely those who could appreciate this blend of academic rigor and engineering prowess. Agencies like the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, and other branches of the Department of Defense sought communication systems with unprecedented levels of security and resilience. They presented Linkabit with problems of secure, anti-jam communications that were themselves subjects of active research. Viterbi and his team responded by developing some of an entire generation of high-performance satellite modems. More significantly, Linkabit produced the world's first commercial hardware decoders implementing the Viterbi algorithm. The abstract concept from the 1967 paper was finally embodied in a physical chip, a device that could execute the complex pathfinding logic at immense speeds. This transformed the algorithm from a theoretical curiosity into an essential, marketable component for digital communications. The company's most famous commercial success, however, addressed a problem far from the battlefield. In the early days of satellite television, premium channels like home box office faced a rampant piracy problem. Their signals, beamed down from space, were easily intercepted by anyone with a backyard satellite dish. The entertainment industry needed a lock, and Linkabit provided the key. They developed the video cipher system, a sophisticated scrambling and descrambling technology for television broadcasts. At the heart of the system's error correction capabilities, ensuring a clear picture even with a weak signal, was the Viterbi algorithm. The irony was subtle but profound. A mathematical tool born from the esoteric study of convolutional codes was now responsible for protecting Hollywood blockbusters from unauthorized viewing. Video cipher became the industry standard, securing Linkabit's reputation and providing a powerful demonstration of its core philosophy that the most abstract academic work could yield immense commercial value. The success of Linkabit was a product of a unique intellectual partnership. While Viterbi provided the theoretical vision and mathematical depth, its co-founder Irwin Jacobs supplied an indispensable dose of engineering pragmatism. Jacobs had a gift for system-level thinking and for managing the complex process of turning a concept into a reliable product. This synergy created an environment where brilliant ideas were held to the standard of practical implementation. The company culture they fostered was legendary. It was an intense, intellectually demanding atmosphere that functioned as a post-graduate school for the brightest young engineers. Viterbi was more than a chief executive. He was a mentor who continued to teach and challenge his employees, pushing them to understand the fundamental principles behind their work. This environment made Linkabit one of the most effective, if unintentional, incubators in the history of technology. The company became a magnet for exceptional talent, and its alumni went on to reshape the digital landscape. This Linkabit diaspora is responsible for the founding of well over 100 technology companies. Among the engineers Viterbi mentored were figures like Henry Samueli, who would later co-found Broadcom, a semiconductor behemoth that powers a vast portion of the world's communication devices. Another key protege was Roberto Padavani, an engineer whose deep understanding of communication theory, honed under Viterbi's guidance at Linkabit, would become central to the development of a revolutionary new wireless technology. Linkabit's legacy, therefore, extends far beyond its own product lines. It established a powerful new model for the high-tech startup, one where academic research and commercial enterprise were intertwined. The company proved that a deep, foundational understanding of information theory was a decisive competitive advantage. It created a generation of engineers who were fluent in both the language of mathematics and the logic of circuit design. By the mid-1980s, Viterbi and Jacobs had built a formidable organization and had sold it, securing their financial futures. Yet for Viterbi, the intellectual journey was far from complete. The world of communications was facing a new and monumental challenge, one that existing technologies were ill-equipped to handle. The nascent field of mobile telephony was straining at its capacity limits, creating a bottleneck that threatened to stifle the dream of ubiquitous wireless access. A far more radical solution was needed, a paradigm shift that would demand every ounce of the theoretical insight and practical expertise Viterbi had cultivated over his entire career. The sale of Linkabit afforded Andrew Viterbi a level of financial security and professional accomplishment that would represent a career pinnacle for almost any engineer. Yet, for a mind conditioned by the boundless landscapes of information theory, commercial success was a consequence of intellectual pursuit, an outcome secondary to the elegance of a problem solved. In 1985, alongside Irwin Jacobs and a small group of Linkabit alumni, he co-founded a new venture named Qualcomm. The venture began without a specific product, animated instead by a shared conviction that the next great challenge lay in untangling the complexities of wireless communication. The world was on the cusp of a mobile revolution, but its technological underpinnings were fragile. First-generation cellular networks, built on analog frequency division multiple access, or FDMA, were straining under demand. In this scheme, the available radio spectrum was sliced into distinct channels, with each call occupying one exclusive channel. The approach was simple, direct, and rapidly approaching a hard physical limit. The global telecommunications industry had already chosen its path forward. The consensus, particularly in the development of the European GSM standard, was to embrace a digital evolution known as time division multiple access, or TDMA. This method kept the discrete channels of FDMA but further sliced each one into repeating time slots, allowing several users to share a single frequency by taking turns. It was an improvement, a logical and seemingly prudent step that promised a threefold or fourfold increase in capacity. To the established players and standards bodies, TDMA represented the secure and sensible future of digital cellular technology. It was against this backdrop of industry-wide consensus that the engineers at Qualcomm began exploring a concept considered by the commercial world to be deeply impractical, yet fascinating: the idea of a spread-spectrum communication, a technique born from the crucible of military necessity, designed for secure and jam-resistant transmissions. The core principle of spread spectrum was a complete inversion of conventional thinking. It proposed that all users transmit across the entire available frequency band, all at the same time. To prevent a cacophony of unusable noise, each transmission was uniquely encoded with a pseudo-random digital sequence, a key known only to the transmitter and the intended receiver. To an eavesdropper, the entire band would sound like low-level static. For a receiver with the correct key, however, the desired signal could be perfectly reconstituted while all other signals remained as background noise. This method, which would come to be known as code division multiple access, or CDMA, was viewed as a technology of immense complexity, suitable for shielding military secrets, but far too intricate for the messy, high-volume, and cost-sensitive world of consumer mobile phones. Qualcomm's engineers, led by the inventive Klein Gielhausen and Roberto Perrone, saw a path where others saw a barrier. They believed the theoretical capacity of a CDMA system could dwarf that of TDMA. The challenge was immense. They needed to build a working system, and even more dauntingly, they needed to convince a deeply skeptical world. This is where Andrew Viterbi's unique genius became the company's most critical asset. He provided the intellectual anchor, the unimpeachable mathematical authority that could transform a theoretical engineering concept into a credible, world-changing technology. Viterbi, working closely with Jacobs and the engineering leads, co-authored a seminal paper that would serve as the theoretical bedrock for the entire CDMA revolution. The paper, titled On the Capacity of a Cellular CDMA System, was a masterpiece of applied information theory. It presented a rigorous analytical model that dismantled the industry's primary objections. The analysis demonstrated that the capacity of a CDMA network was interference limited, a stark contrast to the hard channel limits of FDMA and TDMA. Every additional user added a small, manageable amount of interference to the whole system. The paper's most crucial insight concerned a problem the critics believed was CDMA's fatal flaw, the near-far problem. A user close to a cell tower would drown out the signal of a user far away. Viterbi and his co-authors showed that this was a solvable engineering challenge through a system of precise and rapid power control, where the base station instructs each phone to adjust its transmission power hundreds of times per second. All signals could be made to arrive at the receiver with roughly equal strength. With this condition met, the theoretical capacity of the system was astonishingly high, far exceeding what TDMA could offer. Furthermore, the paper highlighted the power of a device called the rake receiver, which could identify and combine signals arriving from multiple paths due to reflections, turning the pervasive problem of multipath fading into a source of signal strength. This theoretical framework was a spark. It gave Qualcomm the intellectual confidence to invest immense resources into building a prototype. Viterbi's role extended beyond the mathematics. He was a key figure in the strategic effort to evangelize the technology. His academic stature and his unparalleled ability to articulate complex concepts with clarity and force were instrumental in dialogues with potential investors, partners, and regulators. In November 1989, Qualcomm staged a now legendary demonstration in San Diego. They equipped a commercial van with their prototype CDMA system and drove skeptical carrier executives through the city, flawlessly maintaining calls and handing off between cell sites. The demonstration was a triumph, a powerful vindication of the theory Viterbi had helped to articulate. The working demonstration and the solid theoretical foundation paved the way for the creation of the IS-95 standard, commercially known as CDMA-1. What followed was one of the great technological and corporate battles of the late 20th century. The established GSM camp, with its powerful European backing and significant head start, fought fiercely against the upstart technology from San Diego. Yet, CDMA's superior capacity and features like soft handoff, which eliminated dropped calls when moving between cells, proved compelling. Major carriers in North America, Korea, and Japan adopted the standard, creating a massive market and turning Qualcomm into a telecommunications titan. The intellectual DNA of CDMA became the direct basis for the world's third generation, or 3G, wireless standards. Both major 3G pathways, CDMA 2000 and the European favored WCDMA, were built upon the spread spectrum principles that Viterbi and Qualcomm had championed. The CDMA saga was perhaps Viterbi's most profound commercial legacy. It had supplied the theoretical certainty that allowed a small company to challenge and ultimately reshape a global industry. He had witnessed firsthand how an elegant mathematical argument, when combined with relentless engineering and strategic vision, could generate tens of billions of dollars in market value. This experience, observing the direct explosive relationship between investment in fundamental research and its ultimate financial expression prompted a new line of inquiry in his mind. He began to contemplate the very nature of value in the modern technological economy, seeking a more rational framework for assessing a company's potential. He started to formulate a new metric, a simple yet powerful ratio, to distill a connection between a firm's commitment to innovation and its long-term worth. The CDMA saga was perhaps Viterbi's most profound commercial legacy. He had supplied the theoretical certainty that allowed a small company to challenge and ultimately reshape a global industry. He had witnessed firsthand how an elegant mathematical argument, when combined with relentless engineering and strategic vision, could generate tens of billions of dollars in market value. This experience, observing the direct, explosive relationship between investment in fundamental research and its ultimate financial expression, prompted a new line of inquiry in his mind. He began to contemplate the very nature of value in the modern technological economy, seeking a more rational framework for assessing a company's potential. He started to formulate a new metric, a simple yet powerful ratio, to distill the connection between a firm's commitment to innovation and its long-term worth. This new intellectual pursuit moved Viterbi from the domain of information theory into the turbulent world of financial valuation. As the 20th century closed, the dot-com boom was reaching its zenith, creating valuations that seemed untethered from any traditional economic reality. Companies with minimal revenue and profound losses were achieving market capitalizations that eclipsed those of established industrial giants. The conventional metric of our price-to-earnings ratio became meaningless when the denominator, earnings, was negative or non-existent. The financial world was grappling with a fundamental problem: how to differentiate between a genuinely disruptive company building sustainable future value and a speculative bubble inflated by ephemeral hype. From his vantage point as a seasoned executive and, increasingly, an influential angel investor in the San Diego technology ecosystem, Viterbi proposed a uniquely technologist's answer. He introduced a conceptual tool, a heuristic that has come to be known as the Viterbi ratio. The formula is deceptively simple: a company's total market capitalization divided by its annual expenditure on research and development. This was his attempt to cut through the noise of market sentiment and focus on what he considered the primary source of long-term value in a technology enterprise: its intellectual engine. The ratio provided a new lens for analysis, one grounded in the inputs of innovation rather than the outputs of historical profit. The interpretation of this ratio is where its power lies. A company with a consistently high and stable Viterbi ratio was, in his view, demonstrating remarkable efficiency. It suggested that for every dollar invested in R&D, the market was rewarding the company with a significant and durable multiple of that investment in its valuation. This indicated a healthy, functioning innovation pipeline where research was effectively being converted into defensible intellectual property, superior products, and a strong strategic position. The market, in this case, expressed a deep confidence in the firm's ability to generate future cash flows from its current intellectual investments. Conversely, the ratio served as a potent diagnostic for pathology. A company with a low or declining ratio might be suffering from inefficient R&D. Its investments in innovation were failing to translate into perceived market value, signaling potential problems with its research direction, product development, or competitive strategy. An even more telling signal, particularly relevant during the dot-com era, was a ratio that was exploding skyward in a parabolic fashion, a rapidly accelerating ratio where market capitalization grows exponentially while R&D spending grows linearly or stagnates, points to a dangerous decoupling. It suggests that valuation is being driven by speculation and momentum, with the company's perceived worth far outstripping its underlying innovative capacity. For Viterbi, this was the mathematical signature of a bubble. This framework was born directly from his lived experience inside Qualcomm. He had personally overseen the immense R&D budgets required to develop and perfect CDMA technology. He then watched as the market absorbed the implications of that technology, translating those expenditures into a colossal market capitalization. He understood viscerally that the billions spent in the lab were the direct cause of the tens of billions created on the stock exchange. His ratio was an attempt to generalize this observation, to provide a rule of thumb for himself and other investors to assess whether a company's story was as compelling as Qualcomm's or if it was a fiction. Retrospectively applying the Viterbi ratio to the casualties of the dot-com bust provides a clarifying post-mortem. Many of the failed companies had exhibited wildly inflated ratios in the years leading up to the crash, a clear warning sign that their valuations were built on error. In the modern context, the ratio remains a deeply relevant tool for scrutinizing the valuations of companies in fields like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, or quantum computing. One could analyze the trajectory of a firm like NVIDIA through this lens: its long-term, steady increase in market value, tracking its massive and sustained investments in graphics, processing unit architecture, and AI research would likely show a healthy, stable Viterbi ratio for much of its history. This would reflect the market's enduring belief in its R&D engine's ability to consistently produce category-defining technology. The influence of this thinking, while less widespread than his algorithm, has been profound within certain circles. It has shaped the analytical mindset of the many engineers and executives who passed through Qualcomm, a cohort sometimes referred to as the Qualcomm Mafia, who went on to found and lead other successful technology companies. They carried with them Viterbi's emphasis on the primacy of deep engineering and its direct link to sustainable value. His framework also offers a valuable contribution to business academics who study the economics of innovation, providing a simple, practitioner-derived model for thinking about the market's valuation of intangible assets. It is a concept from a technologist, for technologists, offering a sanity check grounded in the physical reality of research and development. This foray into the principles of valuation represents the final stage of Viterbi's intellectual journey as an innovator. He had traced the arc of an idea from its purest mathematical form through its complex engineering implementation to its global commercial scaling. Now, he was stepping back to analyze the economic reflection of that entire process. He was attempting to drive a simple law of economic physics for the world he had helped to create. In doing so, he provided a crucial bridge between the languages of the laboratory and the boardroom, a final contribution that sought to make the creation of technological wealth a more rational and understandable process. This reflective, synthesizing act set the stage for understanding his ultimate legacy, a legacy defined by the seamless integration of these disparate worlds. The analysis of a technological economy through the Viterbi ratio reveals the culmination of an extraordinary intellectual trajectory. This final contribution, an attempt to codify the value of innovation itself, illustrates a mind moving beyond the creation of technology to contemplate its fundamental economic essence. It represents the closing of a circle that began with the purest form of mathematical abstraction. Andrew Viterbi's career, viewed in its entirety, presents something far more profound than a series of brilliant inventions. It offers a coherent and powerful paradigm for progress, a complete narrative arc from abstract thought to the tangible infrastructure of the modern world. His enduring legacy is the archetype he perfected, the theorist entrepreneur, a figure who masters the entire, unbroken chain of modern innovation. This archetype stands as a compelling answer to one of the most persistent challenges in technological development, the chasm often described as the valley of death separating pure research from viable commercial application. Viterbi's life work provides a powerful case study in bridging this divide. He demonstrated that the journey from a foundational mathematical insight to a global market-disrupting force could be navigated by a single, guiding intellect. His career path was a living refutation of the idea that the scientist, the engineer, and the business leader must be separate individuals inhabiting separate worlds. Instead, he fused these roles, showing that the deepest understanding of the core theory provides the most potent weapon for its practical and commercial success. From the elegant optimality of his algorithm to the fierce corporate battles that established CDMA dominance, the intellectual through line was his own unwavering conviction, a conviction born from having mastered every stage of the process. This integrated approach can be distilled into what might be called the Viterbi model of innovation, a demanding yet replicable blueprint. The first principle of this model is to begin with uncompromising mathematical and theoretical rigor. His work on convolutional codes was an exercise in finding the absolute, provably optimal solution within the constraints of information theory. He sought elegance and perfection at the conceptual level, establishing a foundation of pure logic. The second step involves applying this theoretical foundation to solve a high-value, real-world engineering problem. The challenge of reliably decoding a weak signal buried in noise was a ubiquitous and expensive problem, from deep space probes to military communications. His algorithm was a direct, practical answer to this pressing need. The third stage of the model is the creation of an organization to institutionalize the translation of theory into product. Linkabit was a physical embodiment of this translation. It became a crucible where theoretical concepts were forged into reliable hardware, a place that systemized the process of turning academic papers into functioning systems. Linkabit was more than a company. It was an ecosystem designed to accelerate this conversion, attracting minds that could operate fluently in both the abstract and the applied domains. The final, crucial element of the model is the tenacious championing of the resulting technology. With Qualcomm, Viterbi and his colleagues waged a prolonged and arduous campaign to establish CDMA as the standard for cellular communication. This required immense intellectual stamina, commercial acumen, and the courage to challenge an entrenched global industry. His ability to articulate the fundamental technical superiority of CDMA, a superiority rooted in the information theory he knew so intimately, was his ultimate advantage. Therefore, Viterbi's career is much more than an historical account of achievements. It functions as a coherent algorithm for converting intellectual capital into societal transformation. Each phase of his professional life, from his professorship at UCLA to his leadership at Linkabit and Qualcomm, and finally to his reflections on economic value, represents a logical step in this grander process. He provided a powerful testament to the impact possible when a single mind resists the pressures of hyperspecialization and instead pursues a holistic vision. His journey challenges the modern fragmentation of expertise, suggesting that the greatest leaps forward occurred at the intersection of deep theory, sophisticated engineering, and bold enterprise. The world is now built upon the invisible bedrock of his contributions. Every time a mobile phone connects with a tower across a noisy channel, every time a satellite transmits data from the edge of the solar system, the ghost of his optimal decoding path is present. These technological marvels are the direct descendants of his initial insight. Yet, the most vital lesson from his life is perhaps a more abstract one. It is a lesson about the structure of innovation itself. The enduring question his work poses to the next generation of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs is a profound one. It asks how we might emulate a seamless and audacious integration of the theoretical and the practical, and in doing so, learn to build the future with the same intellectual integrity and relentless drive that defined his own remarkable journey.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.